Hi all, Rick here. I've covered extensively the lore and storyline of Star Trek Online with my ongoing story series, yet I can't expect everyone to pour through tons of narrated and personalised story content to uncover it all. Nudge nudge. So, I thought it wise to create some more digestible summaries. Starfleet handles the military aspects of the Federation, but it's not all it is. However, what do we get if the UFP is forced to endure decades of mistrust, tensions, and warfare? The Starfleet of STO differs somewhat from the one we know from the shows. It's a little quicker to lock phasers and generally flies around with shields up. Let's take a look at the differences. Firstly, Star Trek Online takes place in an alternate universe set in 2409, its own timeline, but until there were shows to contradict it, it was not always so. In fact, there was even a brief time when it was referred to as the Prime Timeline events. Although occupants of any timeline are of course going to consider themselves as being the main continuity. But the divergence of timelines begins around the aftermath of Nemesis, at least for the purposes of this video. There's a whole predestination paradox with the Iconian War, which I'm just going to ignore for now. So, I'll start with the overall view before I dive into just how things got this way. In essence, it was a series of escalating events and other factions all vying for power, while external threats began to manipulate from behind the scenes. This all strained Starfleet to the extent that major overhauls were required to keep it afloat, from recruitment to command structure. First off, in this version, anyone can apply to join Starfleet now. Originally, you were required to be a Federation citizen, or be sponsored by a commanding officer if you were not. In order to refill its ranks quicker, however, Starfleet dropped this stipulation. Additionally, those within Starfleet can apply for dual citizenship with the Federation. The most majority reforms came from Admiral Jorrell Quinn, an unjoined Trill who first rose to prominence in 2400. By 2409, the game's beginning year, he's risen to be one of the fleet admirals and can be found on Earth Space Dock, where he coordinates multiple divisions and operations. Thanks to the continual war and the strain Starfleet had been facing over the last decades, these changes are all centred around filling out the fleet and granting more autonomy to individual captains. On the surface level, uniform restrictions were eased at the captain's discretion, allowing the crew to adopt any official Starfleet uniform depending on the requirements of the mission. A surface level change to be sure, but a noticeable one. By the end of the Klingon War, however, there was a standard uniform reintroduced, but the regulations regarding the captain's choices remained. Of bigger importance, however, was the lowering of the command rank to any officer from ensign and up under observation. Initially, you had to be at least a lieutenant commander to be the captain of a starship, but this lowering was in order to fast-track exceptional individuals to where they were needed. But if it did not work out, then the command was not permanent, but if it did, then well done, and it was not unheard of to make captain in rank within a year. Obviously, such audacious promotion was carefully observed by the Admiralty. Additionally, captains were now given the go-ahead to accompany away teams, to reduce potential delay between an encounter and taking action. This was risky, for sure, but several technological advances have made it more feasible, and the risk was considered worth the reward. On an even larger scale, with continued warfare, the Security Division was removed from the Operations umbrella and placed into the Command Division structure, and the other divisions saw a little shuffling too. Science was mostly unaffected, with its subdivisions still being scientific studies and medical. Operations was now shipboard operations and logistics and engineering. Command now oversaw supervisory roles, security, and Starfleet intelligence, and was also termed the Tactical Division. As for the actual captain of a ship, well, with the lowering of rank requirements, the captain too could be from any background, without ever having to transfer to command. Originally, this was only true for certain mission profiles, like a medical captain in charge of a medical ship, or a Corps of Engineers captain in command of a specialist vessel. But now any division could attain the rank of captain and with it be placed in command of a starship if they suited the role, all without any captaincy tests. This is also why the captain's uniform had white shoulders, as well as their division stripe still visible. And lastly, in terms of rank, admirals of various ranks were permitted to serve as ship's captains in special circumstances, allowing Starfleet Command to retain a direct presence in the field. This was because the most major shortages were those experienced captains that required decades to train, so this fast-track program, and bringing down the Admiralty to serve, was all to fill out the deficit ranks. In terms of technology, both limited bursts of slipstream and a rudimentary transwarp network are established in the Alpha and Beta quadrants. Access to the transwarp network is fiercely monitored, and modelled on the transwarp corridors of the Borg, as opposed to something like the Voth's increased warp speed. The slipstream drive is a common occurrence on even older vessels by this time, but can only be used in short durations thanks to the exponential computing requirements needed to operate longer jaunts. In addition to this, Starfleet Memory Alpha teams have developed a new compact power cell, with the goal of applying it to miniaturized shield emitters. This means that many Starfleet away teams are now equipped with personal shielding, which functions in the same way as a ship's shields, but only against handheld fire. The same power cell was then used in reverse-engineered mobile emitters, seeing an increase in the use of holographic officers to supplement things like away teams and duty officers. Finally, along with the uniform variation, there was an extensive list of equipment from fully powered suits of armour to extra shield layers built into armour and holographic interfaces, belts with additional attachments and variability, and so on. The full technology of Star Trek Online also deserves its own video, as this scope is limited to Starfleet itself, but as you can see, variability and adaptability were becoming ever more prevalent. Of course, this is all in service of allowing the player to experience the game, but it's a good justification in universe for it all. So why all these changes? It's impossible to talk about Starfleet without mentioning what the Federation was doing to set the stage for the changes that it would go through, so linked to the two. However, the worlds of Star Trek Online are designed with the setting for a game in mind, and while it depicts a faithful and well-considered unfolding of events, it ultimately produces a galaxy where the Federation has lost its goodwill, while the Klingon Empire rose in power, and what emerges is a time when conflict and war reign. A good setting for an action-based game, and a believable setup, but one best served as a what-if scenario in my opinion. There's a ton here, so I have to condense a lot. Let's get started. In the year 2380, the echoes of the Dominion War are still strong, and the female founder is tried for war crimes and sentenced to imprisonment. Meanwhile, the Federation continues to watch over Cardassia Prime, and sees that it's not handling the rebuilding efforts well, with Federation aid being a divisive topic. In both continuities, Starfleet Intelligence notes the panicked state of the Romulan Star Empire, and they learn that a star in Romulan territory will go supernova with unexpectedly cataclysmic results. In the Prime Universe, this is the Romulan Sun. In STO, it's the nearby Hobus system. Meanwhile, the Borg continue to press in, leading Starfleet to create a task force in preparation to push back their incursions. This is bolstered by advice from individuals such as Captain Picard and Seven of Nine who work together. However, Starfleet continues to prioritise the development of its scientific exploration, with the Stargazer class being commissioned. While we don't see this class in the Prime continuity, it's effectively the Sagan class, minus all the Borg bits, but with the same science missions in mind. In 2382, Starfleet attempted to reverse engineer the mobile emitter of the Doctor, but he protested in the confiscation of it, arguing that it was effectively akin to a mobility aid drawing on the rights of artificial life discussions set up by Commander Data years before. He is successful in maintaining ownership of it, but does acquiesce to letting Starfleet Research and Development extensively study it. This case continues on for years, with Admiral James Bennett continuing to argue that the Doctor may have the rights, but the emitter is property of Starfleet. The Daystrom Institute begins research into creating a new mobile emitter, which will take them decades to complete. It must be about now that Starfleet gives the go-ahead for the Romulan evacuation plan to begin under the command of Admiral Picard. This is a more recent addition to the unfolding of the lore in the build-up to Star Trek Online, added by the emergence of Star Trek Picard. Starfleet is beginning to feel the strain as it juggles multiple responsibilities. While this is unfolding, the Klingons lay claim to Khitomer, using the preoccupation with the supernova to take it back from Romulus. While the Federation stops short of taking political actions like censures, this is something that the UFP does not approve of, increasing tensions between the Allied powers. Over the next year, Starfleet intelligence continues to monitor the unfolding supernova build-up, but feels the burden of all its fronts. While there is little active combat yet, aside from occasional Borg attacks, Starfleet is manning the restoration of Cardassia, the Romulan evacuation, exploration initiatives, Orion piracy crackdowns, and even a new Jem'Hadar threat that was created by a new link from Lars in 2384. Bajor joins the Federation, and in 2385, Starfleet did a large-scale evaluation, reducing its defensive assets in favour of more exploration initiatives. However, the synth attack on Mars then occurred, causing a severe withdrawal of Federation assets. This is a crippling blow. People even whisper that it is a prelude for a second Dominion War, but nothing seems to come of it, and the lack of answers is disconcerting. In its place, paranoia rises, but on the good side, no Borg have been sighted for 2 years now. The Borg task force is dismantled to spread out resources. An outspoken critic of this decision is 7 of 9. In 2387, the Romulan Hobus star goes supernova with all that entails. Nero attacks several Starfleet vessels out of spite and revenge until his ship is seemingly destroyed, witnessed by the Enterprise. The following years are ones of turmoil amid and without the Federation, further leading to the decline in relations between the Klingon Empire, while Starfleet overextends itself even more so. The Empire begins to take advantage of the wounded Romulan territory to claim new worlds, which further aggravates the Federation. On top of this, a revelation is made that Species 8472 have begun ploys within the Alpha and Beta quadrants, adding more fuel to the fire. In 2391, Nausicaan pirates attacked UFP trade routes, which Starfleet was unable to defend. They increased patrols along the Klingon border instead, with the concerns that the Klingon-Gorn War will spill into UFP space. From 2399 to 2402, the events of Star Trek Picard occur pretty much unaltered. However, there are some new changes too. In order to bolster their ranks, Starfleet Command opened up Starfleet Academy recruitment to any applicants, not only those who are Federation members or recipients of a sponsorship. By 2404, Starfleet was developing its transwarp network under the oversight of Admiral Chakotay, all in the hopes of granting its thinned fleet a wider reach. However, 2405 sees the eruption of the Klingon Federation War, and the increase in holographic crews alongside the implementation of personal shielding. As the war rages on, Admiral Jorrell Quinn rises to be one of the few Starfleet 5-bar fleet admirals, and instigates some larger reforms to how Starfleet operates, including those listed in the first half of this video. So, I hope this covers the differences with the Starfleet in Star Trek Online when compared to the Starfleet of the shows, as well as explaining how it ended up this way. It's all in the service to allow the player to experience everything from away team missions to ship command, and even the spreadsheet simulator that is Fleet Admiralty assignments. What we have is a Starfleet that plays a little more loose with its captains and above, but still adheres to a strict chain of command. The captain of a ship has more authority over the equipment and operation of their crew, and such a captain could even be one of these field admirals. The command division probably sees the greatest overhaul, with the infolding of intelligence and security under its banner, so much so that it's technically now known as the Tactical Division, which is probably the biggest marker of a Starfleet at war, that the command and tactics are now synonymous. Of course, the galaxy of STO does not remain in this state forever, and things begin to settle somewhat as the in-game years tick by. But as for Starfleet's changes, this about covers it. I intend to cover several more universes and alternate timelines of Trek, to explore their differences and how things came about, or may have, so let me know if there are alternates out there you'd like to see. I've been Rick, and I'll see you later for another lore video. Until then, thanks again, and goodbye.